John Crawford's first love secretly wore my wedding dress, and in the ensuing struggle, she accidentally fell while pregnant. Sent to the hospital, she was told she could never have children again. In a fit of anger, John sent me to a convent abroad to become a nun. A year later, John personally came to pick me up from the convent, only to find that I had already escaped, holding a child in my arms. With red eyes, he scolded me, "Are you trying to marry because of the child, or are you using the child to insult Chloe Sinclair's infertility?" Of course, John had no idea that the child wasn't his, and that I was about to get married. More than a whole year had passed without seeing each other, yet John remained as self-righteous as ever. Still, I kept my emotions in check, casting a bright, subtle glance. "You guessed everything wrong." The disdain in John's eyes hadn't faded in the slightest, tinged with a hint of smugness and mockery. "I didn't expect your bad temper to remain unchanged. Someone like you could never become the daughter-in-law of the Crawford family." At that moment, Finn, just a month old, began crying uncontrollably, interrupting John's tirade. He furrowed his brow slightly, a flicker of pity for the child flashing in his eyes. He seemed about to speak but held back, making a move to take Finn. At that moment, a sweet, coquettish voice called out from afar, and he finally let go, his gaze instantly following the sound. John, Chloe's footsteps fell, and the moment she saw me and Finn, her expression darkened. But then, like a spoiled child, she hooked her arm around John's, asserting her claim and possessiveness. "John, I didn't know you were here looking for Elaine. Am I a bit unnecessary here?" John quickly explained, "How could that be? She's been reflecting for a whole year, surely she's not as petty as before, right?" He looked up to gauge my reaction, and I just gave a faint smile. "Why would you be the extra one?" "The extra person is obviously me. I'm leaving first." I made a move to leave, but John grabbed my wrist sharply, scolding angrily, "I just said you wouldn't be petty, but I didn't expect you to be the same as before. I really overestimated you." If this were before, I would have been heartbroken by his favoritism toward Chloe, but now, I didn't want to argue with him at all. I broke free from his grasp with force. "I still have a flight to catch. You two can do as you please." This time returning home, I had an important matter to attend to. But as I was carrying Finn to the airport, John was already on the phone booking their tickets back home. Once on the plane, Finn was so hungry he started crying. I hurried to the nursing room to feed him. But Chloe blocked my way, making a move to snatch my child. "Why can't you soothe the baby, sister? Finn has been crying non-stop. Let me try to calm him down." I quickly dodged and held Finn tightly, warning, "Finn has asthma. I'd better do it myself." Unexpectedly, Chloe began to sob, wiping away her tears. "I can't have children anymore. I don't blame you for causing my miscarriage, sister, but can't I at least hold the baby?" Her crying drew the attention of everyone on the plane, all eyes turning to me, thinking I had bullied Chloe. John came over at the sound, looking at me with utter disgust. "Elaine Blake, what's wrong with Chloe wanting to hold the baby? What exactly did she do to make you so relentless? I think you really lack manners." I couldn't bear it any longer. I looked John firmly in the eye, my tone warning, "Finn is my child. Chloe's miscarriage was an accident. Why blame me for it?" No sooner had I finished speaking than John was about to scold me, when other women on the plane began to stand up for me. "After listening for so long, it turns out you were just pretending to be innocent and pitiful, all to snatch someone else's child. How shameless! Snatching a child in broad daylight, and then having the nerve to cry and whine about it." Chloe's face burned with shame at the scolding, and John stepped forward to defend her. "I'm the child's father. This is my family matter." At that moment, a female passenger from somewhere nearby sneered and cursed, "You call yourself the child's father? Helping another woman steal a child, what kind of person does that make you? Don't ever board this plane again. Seeing you two, this disgusting couple, is just bad luck." John, who had never been angered before, was nearly ignited by fury, his chest heaving exaggeratedly, unable to utter a single word. Chloe was even more furious, grinding her teeth, tears welling up in her eyes, and she simply ran into the restroom, sobbing softly. Just as I was about to push open the door to the mother and baby room, John raised his hand to block the doorknob. The man's voice was icy to the extreme, almost through gritted teeth, instructing the flight attendant beside him, "There are so many people with children on this plane who need the mother and baby room, but Ms. Elaine does not." The flight attendant was momentarily at a loss, but since John was a Platinum Card member, she didn't dare say anything. But the others were not pleased. Someone threw a water bottle at him and shouted angrily, "Is this your own plane? How can you be so unreasonable? Someone like you doesn't deserve to be a dad." John, scolded into silence, only glanced back to signal the flight attendant, still refusing to let go. I spoke calmly, "Then I won't need the mother and baby room." At that moment, the woman sitting next to me suddenly spoke up, "I'll cover for you while you breastfeed. I'll file a complaint against this bullying flight attendant right away." I smiled and nodded, returning to my seat, while the woman helped shield me with my coat. After a hard time, I finally finished feeding, and Finn stopped crying, sleeping soundly until the plane landed. After leaving the airport, seeing that I had no intention of getting into the car, John's face instantly darkened, thinking I was sulking. "Elaine, you can take a taxi, but my son can't. Are you trying to use my son to gain my sympathy?" I looked straight at the unreasonable John. "Finn is not your son." But the man seemed to have heard some earth-shattering joke, throwing his head back and laughing bitterly for a long while. "I really didn't see it coming, you're speaking with less and less restraint. You can actually say such unreasonable things." John was about to say more when Chloe suddenly shivered dramatically and sniffled. The man quickly stepped forward with concern, "Are you cold?" Without another word, he draped his own coat over Chloe's shoulders, opened the door, and helped her into the passenger seat. When he turned back to look at me, he had clearly exhausted the last bit of patience he had left. Frowning, he said, "If you're so willing to stand in the cold wind, then go ahead and enjoy it to your heart's content." After speaking, he didn't spare me another glance. The car sped away like a gust of wind. Before long, the Crawford family butler stopped the car in front of me and got out to help with my luggage. "Mrs. Elaine, the old master has been eager to see his eldest grandson. Please get in quickly." I thought back to a year ago, when Harris Crawford rescued me from the convent, and the two of us privately pledged ourselves to each other. At first, old Mr. Crawford was opposed, but Harris, as the eldest son, threatened to die if denied, forcing the old man to relent. Moreover, now that Finn is here, the old master wouldn't say much more. When we arrived at the Crawford estate, the place was brightly lit all along the way. Mr. Crawford took Finn into his arms with eyes full of affection, then glanced behind me. "Why hasn't Harris come back?" "I was thinking we could all discuss the upcoming wedding together." I explained, "Harris still has some matters to attend to at the overseas headquarters. He specifically asked me to come back to see you, and also to handle some issues with the domestic branch." The old gentleman lowered his head, lost in thought. Once inside the house, I found the entire Crawford family gathered, discussing how to make the wedding a grand and splendid affair. John's status was special, he was merely an illegitimate child. Mr. Crawford could only guarantee his wealth and luxury, but he had no real standing. After everything was settled, my aunt, who was the head of the radio station, released the news that very night. Immediately, John's call came through, his tone filled with accusation and mockery. "Elaine, how could you discuss the wedding with my dad and the others behind my back? I haven't even agreed yet." I replied coldly, "Do you really think your opinion matters that much?" After I finished speaking, I hung up the phone and paid no further attention, turning around to carry Finn into Harris's bedroom in the Crawford family home. The next morning, just as I stepped out of the room, I ran straight into John passing by. He was wrapped in a chill, the color drained from his face, his eyes dark and brooding. "Why are you sleeping in my brother's bedroom?" Seeing that I remained silent for a long time, John didn't press further but sighed instead. "Since the wedding is set, we'll follow your arrangements. Now come with me to try on the wedding dress." I glanced at the baffled John, turned to leave, but he grabbed me firmly. Elaine, you're the one getting married, and you're the one acting so cold. Is tormenting me really that much fun? Are you still upset because of Chloe? She and I grew up together. Her ex-boyfriend left her, and I was just checking on her. What's wrong with that? I didn't want to get tangled up with him any longer, so I replied decisively, I think you misunderstood. I'm not angry at all. Really, not at all. As soon as I finished speaking, the man gradually concealed the surge in his eyes and returned to calm. John made a move to take my hand, but with a glance from me, he quietly withdrew it. I've already made arrangements. The original wedding dress has been altered back to its previous size. Whether you want to go or not is up to you. My eyes lit up, and I immediately agreed. That wedding dress, which Chloe had altered without permission, was sent to the country by Harris through someone. It was originally a wedding gift, but now it carried an indescribable fate. If I could get it back, it would be a pleasant surprise. As soon as I stepped out of the Crawford family's gate, Chloe bounced over like a little rabbit, snuggling close to John's side. The moment she saw me, a strong whiff of green tea vibes hit me. The last time I altered my sister's wedding dress size, John gave me a good scolding. My butt still hurts, but it's all good now, the size has been changed back. Sister should be happy, right? Chloe's face was beaming with a mischievous smile. John affectionately scratched her nose, his tenderness unmistakable. Chloe's always the best. Judging by the situation, Chloe would definitely be coming along, so I sensibly took a seat in the back. John froze for a moment as he opened the car door, his eyes full of confusion, but he said nothing. I fell asleep on the way and only opened my eyes when we reached our destination. After entering the bridal shop, the clerk immediately brought out my original wedding dress, a perfect restoration. I carefully inspected the details, and once I was sure everything was restored, I instructed the clerk to put it away. John's eyes darkened slightly, his gaze fixed tightly on mine. Elaine, I went through so much trouble to alter it, and you won't even try it on? The clerk's footsteps paused, but I only raised my hand expressionlessly, signaling her to put it away. Then, in a cold tone, I replied, I have other things to do. Watching me walk away, John's expression grew darker, the light in his eyes gradually fading away. Just as he was about to step forward to chase me, Chloe pouted, swinging his arm coquettishly and said, John, I want to try on the wedding dress too. Stay and keep me company, please. Once in the taxi, I could still see John's sculpted face through the bridal shop window, staring out without a trace of color. After the car started moving, I finally closed my eyes in relief and instructed the driver, take me to the biggest jewelry store in the city. Harris had been working tirelessly to prepare for the wedding, so I planned to pick out the wedding rings myself to share some of the burden. As soon as I entered the store, my eyes were immediately drawn to a South African blue diamond, dazzling brilliantly on display. Miss, you have such great taste, it looks absolutely perfect on your hand. I examined it with satisfaction for a moment, then instructed the clerk to wrap up 2 rings. Just as I was about to pick out a longevity lock for Finn, 2 people walked in through the store entrance. How did Elaine know John and I were coming to look at rings? Is she following us? I didn't look up, continuing to focus on selecting. At that moment, the clerk handed me the wrapped rings, and as I reached out to take them, John slapped my hand to the ground. He sneered disdainfully, why are you suddenly in such a hurry? Just now you were pretending not to care about the wedding dress, and now you're picking out diamond rings, so hypocritical. Afraid you won't get married, huh? Seeing this, Chloe bent down to pick up the bag, opened the ring box inside, and exclaimed, John, this ring is so beautiful. It would look great on you and my sister, but I'm not worthy. John tenderly pulled Chloe into his arms and patted her gently, then took out a ring and slipped it onto her finger without asking. It's just a ring, of course Chloe deserves it. I clenched my fist, pretending to snatch it back. This is my ring, who gave you permission to wear it? John's face immediately changed, and he slapped my hand away with a snap, impatiently saying, you bought the wedding ring yourself, I haven't blamed you for that. What's wrong with Chloe wearing it for a bit? You're really petty. Chloe pretended to be sensible, wearing it for a while before taking it off, but secretly bent the ring out of shape. I want John to buy me one. I don't care about this one. After saying that, she threw the ring on the ground and coquettishly asked John to buy her a new one. I ignored them and, after choosing the collar, went straight to the checkout and left. In the blink of an eye, the wedding day arrived, and I was already dressed in the wedding gown, ready. But John stormed backstage, unable to hide the anger and confusion in his heart. Elaine. Just because of the ring incident yesterday, you're openly forcing the marriage now, huh? I'm telling you, Elaine, I'm not attending this wedding today. Wait until you've reflected and then get married. I refuse to believe you've always been this unreasonable. No sooner had the words left my mouth than the MC, who had just been twitching his lips while going over the script with me, double-checked the cue card and reminded, Mr. John, the groom isn't you, it's your brother, Mr. Harris. John's eyes suddenly sharpened. He jerked his head up and stared at me wide-eyed in shock. What does this mean? Elaine, explain clearly. What do you mean the groom isn't me, but my brother? I tidied my makeup in the mirror, my tone cool as I replied, since returning to the country, I haven't once said I wanted to marry you. It's always been your own wishful thinking. I took a deep breath, stood up to check my appearance, and glanced back at John, who looked disheveled and stunned. You just said you wouldn't attend, and that's fine. Harris and I never even sent you an invitation. If you can't bring yourself to wish us well, you can leave now. I was about to lift my leg, dragging the wedding dress, when John grabbed my arm hard, instantly leaving red marks. He looked at me in disbelief, trembling all over. Elaine, don't be ridiculous. I could tolerate your past antics, but this is a wedding. To force me, you deliberately refused to hold a wedding with me, and dragged my brother into playing this absurd game with you. Are you crazy, Elaine? I pulled my arm away in pain and slapped John's unreasonable face, the veins on his forehead bulged instantly. I laughed bitterly, realizing that in John's eyes, I still harbored feelings for him. That affection had long since vanished with the wind, right on the day he locked me away in the monastery. I rubbed the red mark on my arm, trying to make it fade quickly, to appear less out of control. Just then, the stage crew came to call me up, and I hurriedly composed myself. I glanced up at John one last time, then, supporting the bridesmaid, headed toward the ceremony site. John kept close behind, desperate to grab me and get some answers. But Harris quickly noticed and sent bodyguards to guard the backstage, forbidding him from coming out to cause trouble. This wedding had no elaborate ceremonies. I took Finn directly from the nanny's arms and stood on the stage with Harris. Under everyone's gaze, I still felt a bit nervous. Harris didn't care about any of that. He tightly held my hand and leaned close to whisper in my ear, "Don't be nervous. After all, you're already my wife." But facing the warm scene between Harris and me, apart from the sincere blessings from the Crawford family, everyone else was full of gossip. Elaine slipped right in, and now she even has a child. She really won't marry anyone outside the Crawford family. Isn't that how it is in wealthy families? Lots of shotgun weddings, no such thing as true love. Once you fly up to the top branch and become a phoenix, it's the same no matter who you marry. The quiet murmurs from a few people caused the originally joyful ceremony to fall into an awkward silence. Just as I was feeling utterly ashamed, Harris took the microphone from the host and responded solemnly, "It was my brother John who wronged Elaine. Elaine suffered greatly, and I did everything I could to help her untangle her heart. It was me who pursued Elaine. As for our child Finn, it was a decision the two of us made together, just to reassure my father. If anyone's forcing a marriage, it's me." As soon as Harris finished speaking, those in the audience who had been whispering about me lowered their heads and fell silent. The ceremony was able to proceed. But no one expected that just as the host finished introducing the next segment, John suddenly rushed onto the stage and snatched the microphone. Everyone present was stunned. The atmosphere, which had just begun to ease, instantly grew even tenser than before, the pressure in the air suffocating. Seeing John so agitated, Harris stepped fully in front of me, his voice sharp with warning, I advise you to go down quickly, don't force me. But John seemed to no longer care about anyone, completely ignoring Harris's words, his gaze fixed tightly on me. Elaine, I'm giving you one last chance, come with me now. My good mood was shattered in an instant. I frowned impatiently at him. If you're sick, go get treatment. Harris and I are getting married. John laughed wildly as if he'd heard a hilarious joke, then reached for the microphone to announce something. This action immediately provoked a furious outburst from his father, Mr. Crawford, who trembled with rage. John, do you even realize what kind of state you're in right now? Are you still a member of the Crawford family? John snorted coldly, his eyes seemingly brimming with tears. Dad, you never once treated me as part of the Crawford family. No sooner had he spoken than Mr. Crawford's chest heaved exaggeratedly, his words becoming incoherent as he waved to the bodyguards. Quick, drag this unreasonable bastard out of here. This is utterly disgraceful. Aunt Lydia hurriedly helped Mr. Crawford to sit down, patting his chest to steady his breath. At that moment, several bodyguards, having heard the order, rushed onto the stage, seized John, and forcibly dragged him outside the ceremony hall. Just a moment ago, Harris was frustrated beyond words, but the next second, I tugged his sleeve, suddenly smiled, and patted the back of my hand. Elaine, don't worry, no one can stop us from getting married. With John, the unstable factor, removed, the wedding was able to proceed. However, it inevitably drew criticism from the media, Crawford Group's second young master causing a scene at his elder brother's wedding, even trying to snatch the bride. The photographers in the audience were practically snapping their shutters to pieces. But this did greatly help John step down from his position as branch CEO. As soon as the wedding ended, Harris and I took a car back to the Crawford family to attend the banquet arranged by the family. Finn was quite the favorite, just by himself, he received a huge pile of red envelopes. Harris watched with a mix of amusement and disbelief, his tone dripping with jealousy. I barely come back to the country, and no one gives me a red envelope. Now that he's getting married, everyone's flocking to my son instead. Sigh. No sooner had he finished speaking than everyone present burst into hearty laughter, relatives eagerly scrambling to hand him red envelopes. Third aunt puckered her lips, this Harris has become so slick-tongued after living abroad, ha ha ha. I casually handed him one too, hoping to shut him up, but Harris grabbed my hand and pressed it to his ear, whispering suggestively, I don't even know when the banquet will end. We can't just skip the wedding night step just because we have a child now. So sleepy. My face flushed and heart raced for a moment, I had to pinch his thigh to stop myself from laughing out loud. But everyone at the table was in high spirits. Although no one noticed the two of us, there was no sign of the gathering breaking up. Harris had been cuddling against my shoulder for a long time, but in the end, he grew impatient, propping himself up to suggest ending the banquet. But before he could speak, urgent voices came from outside the hall. Elaine! How long do you plan to keep avoiding me? John broke through the crowd and stormed into the hall. Everyone present exchanged glances, momentarily unsure of what to do. Only Mr. Crawford slammed his hand on the table in anger, completely losing the gentle kindness he had shown while doting on his grandchild just moments ago. John, if you still consider me your father, then leave immediately. Don't ruin your brother and sister-in-law's happy occasion. John was radiating fury, his tongue pressing against his cheek as he sneered at Mr. Crawford's words. Sister-in-law? Elaine is my fiancée. Why should I call her sister-in-law? You must be joking. Harris, who hadn't intended to argue with him, suddenly darkened in expression, as if a storm was brewing. John, the fact is Elaine and I are in love and married. Now you're making a scene in front of everyone, what kind of behavior is that? I don't care whether you accept it or not, but from now on, when you see Elaine, you will address her respectfully as sister-in-law. At this moment, it was impossible to tell whether John's expression was one of crying or laughing, but his whole body radiated a chilling coldness. Harris, fearing I might be in danger, firmly shielded me behind him, but I patted his shoulder and stepped forward anyway. John, oh no, brother-in-law. Although I don't understand what your wild stunt today was all about, at least in front of everyone, you should have held yourself back a little. John's eyes were already red-rimmed, almost bleeding, his voice low and hoarse. Elaine, do we really have to come to this point between us? You should at least remember the sweetness we once shared, so how come the moment you met my big brother, you forgot everything and silently married him? John's words no longer stirred my emotions. I just nodded and smiled softly. The past is the past. Saying this at my and Harris's wedding banquet is really inappropriate. As I spoke, John's fists clenched tighter and tighter. Before I could react, he took a few quick steps forward and grabbed me. His reckless behavior was immediately stopped by Mr. Crawford's stern voice. How dare you? Harris firmly gripped his arm and pushed him about a meter away. I've already given you the respect you deserve. I hope you don't try to take advantage of me any further. Before he could react, Harris's solid punch landed, knocking him to the ground where he couldn't get up. Instantly, blood slowly seeped from the corner of John's mouth. As if sensing the surrounding commotion, Finn suddenly started crying at that moment. Harris turned around and said, "You take Finn back to the room." "Leave it to me." I hesitated and nodded, about to leave. But suddenly, I felt a force tugging at the corner of my clothes. Turning around, I saw it was John. A trace of softness flickered in his eyes, the earlier loss of control and breakdown completely vanished. "Elaine, I beg you, don't abandon me. I truly still love you." I only subconsciously noticed Finn was still crying and fussing, and my patience waned further. I looked at him coldly. "Brother-in-law, what you're saying to me is truly crossing the line." Ignoring John's shocked and stunned expression, I slightly bowed. "Excuse me." I hurriedly left holding Finn, but behind me came the sound of an even more intense fight, rising and falling in waves. I only heard Harris panting heavily, then adopting the demeanor of an older brother. "You want to fight so badly? Then I'll fight with you." Hearing this, I hesitated for a moment, but remembering that old Mr. Crawford was still around, I figured Harris probably wouldn't get hurt. Back in the room, just as I had Finn lulled to sleep, I heard the wailing of ambulance sirens from downstairs. I hurried to the window and looked down, only to see John being carried onto the ambulance. Beside him stood a frightened Chloe, clutching Harris's collar and crying out, "What happened to my John? Aren't you his big brother? Why did you beat him up like this?" Harris showed no mercy, pushing Chloe to the ground with a cold tone. "He brought this on himself. Otherwise, I wouldn't have laid a hand on anyone on my happiest day." A flash of joy lit up Chloe's eyes, her excitement barely contained. "So that means Elaine really has married you. Does that mean John can marry me now?" Harris let out a helpless cold laugh and then ordered someone to close the main gate. At that moment, my phone rang. It was a senior executive from the branch office. He said they had already seen the news report. John's reckless attempt to snatch a marriage was already affecting the branch's stock market. "Miss Elaine, at this critical moment, the matter you mentioned will be even easier to handle." I stood by the window watching the ambulance gradually disappear, feeling a sense of relief in my heart. I replied, "Then I'll leave it to Mr. Sue." Just as I hung up the phone, I felt a force restraining my waist. Turning around, Harris lazily rested his chin on my shoulder, his voice soft and sweet as he acted coquettishly. "Wifey, it's all that brat's fault for delaying our wedding night." I awkwardly supported his body, pinching his firm cheek with a mix of amusement and frustration, and said apologetically, "I didn't expect him to cause trouble either. It's really quite a headache. By the way, just now General Manager Sue from the branch office called me. According to him, it's best to expedite John's resignation, otherwise, dragging it out will only lead to more complications." But Harris's mind was nowhere near that. He reached out to play with the stray hairs by my ear and quietly leaned in. "Shoo. Just leave everything to your husband to handle, okay?" Sensing the intimate atmosphere, I instinctively turned my head to glance at Finn, only to have him mercilessly grasp my chin, forcing me to look into his eyes. The quiet room allowed the ambiguous hormones to spread recklessly. Slightly intoxicated, he gently pulled me down with his arm, pinning me to the bed, leading me with his gaze. The next moment, Harris's sudden kiss traveled downward, catching me completely off guard, my entire mind going numb. I grabbed his wandering hand and sternly warned him, "If you wake the sun, I'll leave him to you to soothe." Harris's eyes half closed, seemingly not hearing a word I said, and agreed outright. But halfway through, Finn was still woken up and started crying in a babyish voice. Harris's movements came to an abrupt halt, his face full of grievance. "It's all your fault, otherwise our son wouldn't have woken up." I was about to argue, but Harris suddenly pressed a kiss down, silencing me. He stroked my head, pressed his lips into a straight line, glanced at Finn, then looked at me with affection. "You're tired today too, don't worry. I'll take Finn to the guest room to put him back to sleep. You should get some rest early." Watching Harris leave with the child, I gradually fell into a peaceful sleep. But the next morning, it was Aunt Lydia who came into my room to wake me up. Elaine, Harris, and John got into a fight at the company. I quickly got up, dressed, and had the butler rush me to the company. As soon as I entered, I found everyone crowded on the second-floor platform, packed like sardines. Judging by John's stance, he probably already knew about the shareholders' joint request for him to step down. Seeing me walk in, John, who had been raging at everyone, suddenly fell silent and looked at me in disbelief. "Elaine, was it you who brought up the request for me to step down? I've always been sincere with you, and yet you treat me like this." I suddenly frowned, disdainful of what he said, and replied coldly, "You overestimate me. This was decided by Dad and Harris because you really don't have the ability to be a good CEO, nor can you lead Crawford to greatness." John instantly looked utterly dejected, taking a few steps back, gazing at my face with a hint of grievance. "Elaine, actually, if you're willing, I don't need any company. I'll divorce him right now, marry you, and give you everything I have, okay?" I immediately felt a headache coming on and stood beside Harris, sizing him up. "With so many outsiders around, you should at least call me sister-in-law, or it would be a disgrace to the family's reputation." John bit his teeth viciously, turning Harris into a thorn in his side, veins bulging on his forehead. Just as he was about to say something, a petite figure suddenly rushed in from afar, repeatedly calling out, "John." Chloe squeezed her way to the center of the crowd, suddenly grabbing John's arm, crying and shouting as if she had been deeply wronged, "John, that wretched woman isn't worth you anymore. Will you marry me? I'll agree to marry you right away." The former little assistant was now shouting that she wanted to marry John, instantly sparking a flurry of gossip. "No way? Assistant Chio and President He have already reached the stage of discussing marriage? I thought they were just in the honeymoon phase. Well, this is great. Both members of the Crawford family are getting married, that's truly double happiness." As the eldest brother, Harris looked at the scene before him and suddenly cleared his throat. "If you two are really serious about getting married, I'll talk to Dad. As for family background, I don't think it'll be much of an issue." Hearing Harris say this, Chloe was so happy she almost jumped up, excitedly grabbing John's arm and shaking it. "John, since Big Brother agrees, let's hurry up and have the wedding. I really look forward to marrying you, Smack. John mustered all his strength and slapped Chloe, the sound echoing through the empty building. Everyone on the scene gasped sharply, and the smile that had just been on Chloe's face completely vanished, leaving her standing there like a statue. "John," Chloe looked at the man before her, who showed not a trace of affection, disbelief written all over her face, her pale lips trembling. John took a steady breath, his tone as if wrapped in ice, chilling to the bone. "When did I ever say I was going to marry you? The one I love has always been Elaine. Don't flatter yourself." Chloe stood frozen in place. The woman, tears welling in her eyes, covered her left cheek, her brows furrowed, looking pitiful and vulnerable. "John, you used to be so good to me, always standing by my side no matter what. Why are you saying things like this now? In what way am I any less than that woman?" Hearing this, John sneered contemptuously, his thin lips parting and closing. "You're nowhere near her. I was only good to you to make Elaine jealous. Now look, it's all because of you that Elaine has already married someone else. Not just me, but probably everyone present had never heard John openly curse like that before. John realized he had misspoken and gradually restrained his emotions, turning his head to the side. "Go away, and don't let me see you again." But Chloe kept crying uncontrollably, so John called the security to drag her out. The atmosphere on the scene was icy to the extreme, but John didn't care. He strolled slowly up to Harris, staring at him with a provocative gaze, his brows furrowed fiercely. I never thought that my usually calm and composed big brother would actually compete with me for a woman. In that case, I'd rather not have you as my brother at all. Harris's brow twitched slightly, and he instinctively glanced at me before curling his lips into a smile and saying, "Do as you please. I just want to be with Elaine, I don't care about anything else." Harris quietly stepped back a few paces, came up to me, took my hand, and kissed it. Then he glanced back at the utterly disheveled John and raised his hand toward the bodyguards. The bodyguards received the signal and quickly surrounded John, coldly escorting him out. "Mr. John, please." The stubbornness in John's eyes hadn't faded in the slightest. He pressed his tongue against his cheek, pushed past the bodyguards, and walked out on his own. The remaining major shareholders held a shareholders' meeting and officially relieved John of his CEO position. Harris planned to temporarily take over the role and stay in the country to support me for a while until I was capable. After the shareholders left the meeting room, they saw many people rushing out of the building in a hurry. An employee passing by reported the situation. "There was a car accident in front of the company, but someone has already called the police." According to witnesses, after John left the company, he happened to run into Chloe waiting for him. Chloe pleaded desperately, willing to marry him wholeheartedly. But John's emotions had completely collapsed, he couldn't bear her entanglement any longer. In the scuffle, John shoved Chloe into the traffic, and blood immediately spilled everywhere. Passers-by called the police. When we reached the building entrance, we found John sitting motionless, watching the medical staff cover Chloe's body. Before long, the police arrived, reviewed the surveillance footage outside the company building, and pieced together the details of the accident. They planned to take John to the station for further investigation. The moment John was handcuffed, he glanced at me thoughtfully, then never looked up again. As expected, John was imprisoned for intentional homicide. But hearing the news coming from the prison, I realized that his mind had already begun to slowly unravel. If the upcoming examination results met the criteria, he would be transferred to a psychiatric hospital. Upon receiving this news, Mr. Crawford was so furious that he nearly had a heart attack and immediately announced he was severing all parental ties with John. However, after all this turmoil, things finally seemed to reach a pause. Harris and I threw ourselves wholeheartedly into work, and for me, it was indeed a challenge. In the early hours, I was still working overtime at the office. Suddenly, I felt a slight weight settle on my shoulder. "Let's head home soon, don't overexert yourself." Harris handed me a cup of warm milk, then clasped the back of my hand, tilting his head with a look of concern. I lifted the milk, my gaze catching the snow drifting outside the window, looking especially beautiful under the streetlights. "It's the first snow of the year." In that moment, both of us felt wide awake. Harris held me tightly from behind as we watched the first snow outside the window. He whispered into my ear, "I love you." All of this was as beautiful as a painting, transcending all the mundane and the chaos.